I've always believed we're going to talk a lot about Ali's going to talk a lot about investing and things like that when I give him a proper introduction. And I got to tell you something. The one advice I always give everybody is you need to play. I've always believed we're going to talk a lot about investing. Ali's going to talk a lot about investing and things like. There we go. Fix that. Sorry about that. The best investment Claudia and I have ever made is real estate. We got our house in Colorado for $300,000. It's a significant 7-figure house now, 24 years later, and it's free and clear. Okay. I mean, have you ever had an investment that gave you that big a return? I mean, it didn't double, it didn't triple, it more than, I don't even know how many times it's doubled in value and we didn't steal it when we bought it. It was fair market value at the time. We were lucky we bought the right house at the right place at the right time. But every piece of real estate that we have ever owned, investment property or personal property, guess what it's done over 10, 15, 20 years? Take a wild guess.
Gone up.
It's gone up. It's gone up in value. It's provided a shelter, place to raise our kids, tax benefits. It increased our credit rating. It gave us security if we ever needed emergency money, and it appreciated. It went up in value. So to me, we're talking about investing today, whether real estate goes up or down on a long-term basis. If it's a good property in the right neighborhood, you'll always do well with it. I mean, that's my story on that. We can maybe Ali will delve on that a little bit later. Anybody else, real quick, because I want to spend as much time with Ali as possible today. Going once, twice. Okay, without further ado, I want to introduce Claudia and I we've always tried to surround ourselves with smarter people than ourselves. Ali is one of those guys. He's not only one of the smarter people I know, he's also one of the nicest people I know. Ali, I'm going to embarrass him a little. He advised us on one move here. I'm going to share a little personal stuff. We did one move, I think it was last year. Ali got us to switch companies, and I think we got rewarded with that one move. I think it was $110,000, Ali, or something like that. Just this one move. You remember, what was it, Mass Mutual or something, Ali?
Yeah, they wanted you out of the annuity, and they were willing to buy you out.
Yeah, and they gave us $110,000 when we were all said and done. That beats working for a living, guys. Absolutely. I want to introduce Ali, though. This is a sharp guy. This is This is the person I trust. I like to share the people I respect and listen to. And Ali, how many years have we known each other? Is it 15 now, or at least, or something like that?
It's got to be getting close to that.
It's got to. You took over Roger's portfolio.
That was probably 09, so it's probably 11 years.
So without further ado, here's a guy we want to listen to and ask a lot of questions to protect ourselves, to give ourselves security, to wisely invest. Ali, you got the floor. Thank you so much. Round of applause. Thank you for joining us, man. I know you're a busy guy.
Thank you, Claude. You are so kind.
The check's in the mail, right?
Check is in the mail. I actually called Claude on Friday and said, what should I talk about? And we talked a little bit, and he said most of you are in real estate. And so I'm just going to go through my regular checklist. I go through with kind of an intake form with new clients, but I'm going to put in a lot of commentary towards real estate. And I would love for you to interrupt me and ask questions if you have them. And then if we have time, I threw together a couple of slides that I'll just kind of breeze through on markets and some other stuff. But I'm going to talk a lot about real estate because that's what you guys are into.
Ali, I'm going to give you, since you want to show slides, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to make you a co-host right now. And I'm also going to mute you and everyone else so there's no interruptions. And so you're going to have to unmute yourself, okay?
Okay.
Just so we don't have any Jamaican steel drum bands in the background or anything like that. Let me just mute all. There we go. Okay.
Okay, so since he muted everyone, if you have a question, just unmute and raise your hand or interrupt me or whatever. And
use the chat box too.
I don't see the chat box. How do I put that in?
I have a chat box, but I'll read it to you if somebody has a question.
Perfect. So I always start the conversation with risk management, which is typically what puts everyone to sleep. But if I start with it, maybe you're still awake to hear it. Number one is figure out what your monthly burn rate is. How much are you going through? And if you own real estate, and it depends on the type of real estate you're in, but if you own long-term hold real estate, you need to factor in the cost of that as well in your monthly burn. So if your mortgage on it is $1,500 a month and your other expenses are another $500, that $2,000 needs to be part of your burn rate, even though most months your renter is going to pay that and then some extra, but you need to be able to weather storms with that. And so once you know that number, and I'm just going to use 10,000 so we have a round easy number for me to do math with, you want to have at least 3 months of that in savings. And that savings is never to be touched unless it's a true emergency. So that's not the down payment money for the next property. That's not any of those things. That might be the covering rent while the thing is getting renovated between renters or something, or it might be refrigerator falls through the floor in your own house and insurance doesn't cover it and you need to take care of it. But if you've got that 3 month cushion, you can weather a lot of storms that most people in the US can't. And then beyond that 3 months, I like to see 6 to 12 months of liquidity. And all 6 months could be in savings if you're conservative, and beyond 3 months could start being invested in markets or more aggressive things if you're a little bit more aggressive. But I mean, go back to, I'm not going to take you way back in time. I'm going to take you back a year. When COVID hit, how many people looked in the mirror and said, I got this, I have plenty of money, I'm going to be fine? Like, we all ended up being fine, right? We're all here and we're still standing. But when that happened, we didn't know what was going to happen. How would you have felt if you didn't have a year in cash? How would you have felt if you had 6 to 12 months of liquidity, not knowing what was going to happen? I mean, we've been on quite a ride. Life insurance. I'm just going to go real high level here. Unless you have significant assets to take care of your family, and if you don't have a family, you can check out for this little part, you should have 10 to 20 times your annual income in life insurance. That's what protects them if you get hit by the proverbial bus. And I've had 2 46-year-old clients die in the last year. So when I say this, I have crazy conviction because we don't know what will happen. Disability insurance. This one's actually tough if you're in real estate exclusively. You can't get disability insurance unless you have a track record of income from that. But we're more likely to be disabled than we are to die before we turn 65. And even if you listen to everything I said so far and said, oh, I'm going to get 12 months in savings and liquidity, that's only 12 months. What if you're disabled till, the rest of your life, for 2, 3, 4, 5 years? And so that's one of those things. It's not inexpensive. It's hard to get, and it's super important.
I got it real cheap a long time ago.
You did.
Yeah.
Well before you met me.
Yeah.
A long-term care insurance is another one. As I look at the screen, there's a whole bunch of different ages I see here. You want to make sure your parents have it unless they have a truckload of money or no money at all, because otherwise they're going to be living in your basement. And then ourselves, we want to typically get it mid to late 50s. And some of our clients will even put it on a life insurance policy when they're younger, so they don't have to worry about it later. My 2 least favorite things to deal with are disability insurance and long-term care insurance. So I gave them lip service. We talked about it. No one's asked any questions because you're probably as excited about those things as I am. And then the last piece of risk management, and show of hands, how many of you are in Colorado? I just see Alex raising his hand. So it looks like everyone's all over the country. I don't know the statistics everywhere else, but in Colorado, 1 in 4 drivers has no insurance at all. So if you get in a car wreck, there's a 25% chance that the other guy or girl has no coverage at all. So the thing I tell my clients is you want to maximize your uninsured, underinsured motorists, and you want to have at least 500,000 per incident. A lousy property and casualty agent will cut this coverage to save you money, and that's a really bad place to save money. And then the other thing I recommend is that you have an umbrella policy. It should be at least $1 million. And if your net worth is over $1 million, it should be equal to your net worth. So if you're worth $10 million, you should have a $10 million umbrella. Any questions on the risk management?
What is really an umbrella for? Could you define it or just elaborate on that a little more?
Yes.
Yes. So you have your basic coverage. So let's say I own a house and 2 cars. So I've got my car insurance and my house insurance, and then my umbrella sits on top of those. It provides $1 million more of coverage if it's $1 million umbrella, and it's super inexpensive. $1 million of coverage is probably $250 to $300 a year. And that's what protects you if mailman falls on your front porch and breaks his hip and has complications and sues, and it's beyond what your homeowners covers. It creates a separate pool of capital to take that risk off of your personal balance sheet. And so I could talk about this in estate planning, I could talk about this in taxes, but I'm going to throw in here with risk management for those who own real estate. The other thing you can really do to mitigate risk is look at the structure of how you own your stuff. If you own rentals, and I don't know how, there's so many ways to make money in real estate and lose money in real estate. But I personally am a really weird financial planner because I love real estate and I own a lot. Every property I own is in its own LLC. And so the challenge you have with that, so let's talk about the pros first, and then I'll talk about the challenges. When it's in its own LLC, each property is isolated from my personal balance sheet and from each other property. So if that mailman breaks his hip on one of my properties, he can't come and take my personal assets, my house, my bank accounts, any of those things. He's limited to the value of that property. Well, first the insurance on the property, and if we go beyond the value of the insurance, the property itself. Everything else is sheltered, so there's a wall there. You've got some disadvantages to an LLC too, and they're not insignificant. One, depending on how you do it, you may have to do a separate tax return for each LLC. If you don't have partners, you can do a single member LLC and then file it on your Schedule C on your tax return. But if you have partners, it has to have its own tax return. And if you have partners and it's not in an LLC, you're setting yourself up for huge problems anyway. 2, financing can be difficult. Unless you have a bank that's willing to have you personally guarantee for the LLC and tie the debt to the LLC, banks don't like it because it's easy to move LLCs and assets around within there. And so you have to find a banker who's willing to do those things for you. And then you have to treat it like a business. If you just set up an LLC and you don't do an operating agreement and you don't set up a separate checking account and you don't treat it professionally as though it's its own entity, you're going to lose that protection. It's called piercing the corporate veil. A good lawyer is going to say, I'll pick on Suzette because she's nodding her head. I can say, man, Suzette, you took that money and the checks right into your checking account every single month. You spent it. You didn't keep good records. We're not going to allow that. So there is a little bit of work behind it. I don't think if it's your first or second real estate deal, it's super important unless you have a significant net worth outside of that. But if you have a significant net worth, I'm throwing that under risk management because that's where it's really protecting you. Debt management. So one of the things I see with real estate is it's a place where I see a lot of people make a lot of money. And it's also where I see more people go bankrupt than anywhere else. And the bankruptcy is 99% of the time the same problem. they're over leveraged. So, and I mean, I don't know how many books you can go find on zero down real estate investing and all these things. When you have leverage, it makes the good times better and it makes the bad times worse. And it can make the bad times blow you up. So when you're dealing with real estate, having those reserves is super important. And I don't know where to put this in the conversation, but having a banker, like a good, amazing banker who's got your back. Like my banker literally calls me twice a month and says, "Do you want to borrow any money?" No one has that, right? And I did introduce him to his wife, so maybe maybe that's why. But
hey, Ali, I got a quick question.
Yes.
In regards to bankers, what would you recommend would be a best way to properly vet or to find that banker that would meet our needs in this business?
That's a really good question, and I'll tell you how I met mine, and maybe that helps a little bit, and some things that I like, and I'll tell you where I don't think you go. But other than that, you're kind of on your own. So we were at a bar 20 years ago, and I was going to dinner with my wife and 5 of her girlfriends for one of the girls' birthdays, and they saw this guy at the bar that they thought was cute. And so my wife goes over and talks to him and brings him over, and he ends up joining us for dinner. And his name's Brandon. He's Brandon Berkeley, and he was moving to Denver to open their family's bank first branch in Denver. They joined us for dinner. He moved to Denver, kept calling. We became great friends, and I've never looked back. But I wasn't even looking for a banker at the time. I just happened to connect with this guy, and the stories I could tell about him, he's one of the best humans I know. Here's the things I've learned, I've taken away from it. One, I think you want a local bank. I think you want to be able to walk in, shake a hand, talk to the president, know who you're dealing with. You're not going to get that at Wells Fargo or JP Morgan. I wouldn't deal with the big banks at all if you're asking for my advice. You need the big banks if you're doing really fancy, super big stuff, because you run into credit limits and things like that. But if you're under the lending limits of the local bank, they are much more likely, and not guaranteed, much more likely to work with you when there's a problem. They're likely to be on your team. They're likely to be possibly consultative. So when you deal with a big bank, it's all about underwriting, right? Do you check the boxes up? You check them. Here we go. Let's do it. When you deal with a small local bank, so again, I'll give an example with Brandon. I come back from Christmas vacation, hanging out with my in-laws, and I decide that I want to buy properties in Idaho in 2010. Okay, I don't know if y'all remember 2010. Banks weren't giving money to anyone, and Brandon only loans in Colorado. So I talk to him. I tell him what I want to do, and he says, "Well, if you put enough down, I guess I'll try a couple of these with you." And so I show him my life insurance policy that has cash value in it. So I use that as my collateral for the down payment. And I go to Idaho and I put offers on 4 places in one morning, and I call him at lunch. I'm like, I made 4 really lowball offers, and I was the only guy buying. Like, it's so weird today as we talk about, I tell this story, like, you're like, no way. I was the only one there. Like, everyone thought I was a complete idiot as I'm out there looking at these places, and they're asking 70,000, and I tell my realtor, let's offer 40. And he's like, we can't do that, Ali. I'm like, just put it in and let's see what happens. So I get to lunch. I'm out of money if these lowball offers are taken. And I call Brandon on the phone. I'm like, I got 5 more to look at this afternoon. Can we double what we talked about? On the spot, on the phone, no questions asked. He says yes. I go make offers on 3 or 4 more places that afternoon. All of them are bank owned at this point. So I go home, come back to Colorado. 2 weeks later, my realtor calls and says, you won't believe this. You got this property. Well, I got 7 or 8 more calls over the next week, and he was floored. and he's a really good realtor. He was floored. I got every single property at whatever I offered. And those properties today have gone up 5, 6, 7 times in value. There's lessons here. One, you've got to have money, dry powder for when the opportunities come. And it's really hard right now for me to tell someone that, because everyone's watching everything be crazy and these huge offers. And you know what, I think, was it Alex's question at the beginning, like where does this end? What happens? I don't know. I don't think it's anytime soon. But when it does end, to be the guy that can go out and buy, right? Not
Say
the
that.
one who's-
Say it again. That is one of the best. I say that too. Let's be ready for have the rainy day, because someday you're going to find that great once in a lifetime deal. And are you going to be ready with it with cash or credit? The one deal that can set you up for life, maybe.
And the credit gets hard in those times. That's the thing we forget. Like, I remember, it must have been 08 or 09, somewhere in there. And I truly believe I could not have sold my house at any price, because no one could find a loan to buy it. Maybe at some super, super low price I could have, but the banks quit lending, right? Even when I was buying the stuff in 2010, it was that relationship with the bank that allowed me to go out and do that, because I didn't have enough money to go buy all those places. And so hopefully you guys draw something from that story, because that's the value of a good banker. That's the value of a relationship. And you can't make that relationship when the world's on fire. You have to make that relationship now, right? You have to, when you go to them and things are bad and say, hey, you know me, you trust me, let's go do this. They got to look at you and say, yep, let's do it. Not, hey, I'm going to be a banker and not give you money when you need it. More on debt management. On your personal debt, number one, right now, you should be getting rid of it. Times are good. You should wipe out every single piece of debt you have other than your home. Your home rates are silly right now. I have a 2.75% loan on a jumbo loan for 15 years. I'm like, I can't believe a bank is on the other side of that. I've had clients come in at 2% on a 30-year. They got it right at the bottom on a non-jumbo. We're talking, even as rates have ticked back up, you're 3.25% on a 30-year fixed. If you have debt that you can refinance into those long-term rates, do it. And don't wait, because I don't think rates will go back down to where they were. I could be wrong on that. I'm always wrong when I try and predict short-term stuff like that, but those rates are unreal.
Does anyone here remember 16, 17% mortgage rates? I know I remember.
My first home loan was 7.75 back in 98, and my HELOC was 10.25. And no one put a gun to my head and said, Allie, go borrow that money. That was a competitive good rate at that time. I mean, yeah, so take advantage of those low rates, and leverage them. I mean, I'm not a leverage fan, but your personal residence is the one thing that you can get those super low rates on, and you can leverage that into other projects or properties. Just do it intelligently, please. Show of hands, who has clearly defined goals? Who has them written down somewhere? I'm seeing a couple hands. If everyone's seen Alice in Wonderland, that there's a part where they go to the Cheshire Cat and they say, which path should we go down? And the cat says, where are you going? And they say, we don't know. And the cat says, then any path will do. Right? If you don't know where you're going, how are you going to get there? And so you should have your goals written out. You should review those from time to time. Make sure they're still relevant. And the exercise I like to do, because I don't have them in front of me constantly, and maybe I should, but the one that I've always done is I sit down every 5 years and I write out my name, and my current iteration is I'm 45 years old. I'm not there yet, guys. Don't judge. I'm only 44. But it says everything in present tense that I'm going to be when I'm 45. I've got my net worth, where my family, my kids, my tennis, my everything written out. And when I go back and look at those, 90+% of whatever I write in there comes true. So that's, I don't know who gave me that. I stole that from someone. It's not mine, but steal it from me and use it. And then the other thing is, think about your goals. I've talked to a lot of people in real estate. I want to have X amount of doors. I don't think that's a good goal, personally. I think a much better goal is I want to have X amount of doors generating blank positive cash flow per month. Because owning doors doesn't mean anything, right? If I own 1,000 doors and they're each losing $10 a month, I'm going to be bankrupt pretty fast. If I own 100 doors and they're each making $1,000 a month, I'm going to have Claude come visit me on the beach and we're going to have a Mai Tai and hang out. So when you're making your goals, think about, if I get there, is that where I want to be?
I always thought of goals as getting rid of consumer debt, mortgage debt, just lowering the river instead of raising the bridge. Income also, of course. I always said income goals. My original income goal, I've shared this with the group, was $1,000 a month. Claudia and I were a young couple, new baby. I was in law school. I just wanted that extra $1,000 a month over and above what we needed. And that was a pretty, even $1,000 then in the Stone Age was a lot of money. But it was an initial stepping stone to get to 2,500 and then 5,000 and keep it growing, but also reducing debt. When you say goals, owning your own home free and clear someday, that was a goal also. When you say goals, how do you break it down? If you could maybe elaborate on that.
Yeah, so when I do that 5-year thing, maybe that's less goals, more vision, right? There's goals in there, like I want my net worth to be this, I want that, in my world. But to Claude's point, those are goals. Hey, I want to pay off my house. I want to have 100,000 or 1 million or 10 million in my investments. So those are definitely goals. And I said it earlier, but the debt one is so big, especially if you're trying to be in real estate. To have anything on your balance sheet other than what you need for your personal residence and your real estate investments, it slows down your ability to do those other things, right? Not only from a cash flow perspective, but from a lender perspective, right? My banker doesn't call me wanting to loan me money because I have a lot of debt. Right? He wants me to borrow money because I don't have debt, which is where you want to be unless it's on the project that you're working on. Does that make sense? Are your allocations aligned with the time horizon and risk tolerance? That's financial planner talk for, are your risks in line with your comfort level? And unfortunately, everyone's aggressive in a bull market. Everyone's like, oh, I want to get the best return possible. Things are so good. To be that way, you have to be okay last March when your portfolio is down 34%. And so I always think about aligning our accounts with you think of them as different buckets. So my retirement bucket, no judging, I'm still young, should be super aggressive. But that 6 to 12 months we talked about earlier of liquidity, that might be a different bucket that's a lot safer. We're not going to get as good a return when things are great. But when the market's down 34, maybe we're down 10 or 15%. We can't be down zero. If we want to be down zero, then we have to be in cash, and we're not going to get any return on it. But I see a lot of people where there's no thought to how their money is invested. And you know, most people, if you look at the statistics, if they have a 401k, they go in one time ever and they decide how much money they're going to put into it, and they pick the investments and they never look at it again. And that's like, I think it's 76% of participants, that's the case. That's astounding. That's the place where a lot of us are putting substantial assets. A lot of my clients, that's their biggest account, is their 401k, and they don't even pay attention to it. I always, my saying is, money's like kids. As soon as you don't pay attention to it, it causes trouble. And so another lesson or takeaway or something you might get out of this is make sure all your money is in one place or two places, you know, as few places as possible, and being managed in accordance with going back to your goals. Is enough being contributed to reach the goals under reasonable assumptions? Again, are you doing the things, and it doesn't matter how, it doesn't matter if it's real estate or the stock market or various things, are you doing the things you need to get where you want to go? Are they going to get you there? And if not, and this should be decision by decision, project by project, as you look at them, you got to look at them and say, yeah, this is getting me in the right direction, I'm going to do it. Or no. Like sometimes think of a marginal project. Let's say you have some cash sitting around and you're like, I got to put 100,000 in, and if everything goes good, I'm going to get 10,000 back in profit in 2 years. That's a pretty marginal project, right? If you do that project and a good one comes along, you don't have the money to do it, to do the good one, because you spent the money on the weak one. Does that make sense? So you gotta make sure that whatever you're doing is getting you closer to where you're trying to go. And Claude, I saw a question pop up. Oh, it's in chat. Hold on, I can.
Yeah, you got two questions, one from Alex. 6 to 12 months liquidity, couple examples of assets or products aside from CDs. Did you answer that one already?
So I didn't specifically. So Alex, for the 3 to 6 months, I want FDIC insured. I don't care if it's.
Hey, thank you.
You can go to bankrate.com and find FDIC insured. Right now, the yields are so low and everything. The best you're going to do is probably 0.4% a year. But it's not about making money on that. It's about being safe. So it's really the 3 to 12 months, right? Because you might do 3 to 6 in that FDIC insured. Then that 3 to 12 months, a lot of times we'll use like a 60-40 allocation of typically mutual funds or ETFs. We're not being super aggressive with it, but we still want it to grow. And a lot depends on, are you going to tap into this or not? Because that part, if you wanted to tap into for real estate or something, maybe you do 6 or 9 or even 12 months in CDs, or I don't even like CDs. I prefer a money market because it's a little more liquid. But you really don't want to get too aggressive in those accounts if you're going to need them for anything. If you're not, then you might take those all the way up to all stock.
Yeah, so, I'm thinking something like a whole life policy. I got a couple of whole life policies. So I was thinking maybe kind of juicing that policy and kind of having that be my reserve of, 3 to 6 months, because I can access up to, 90% of that actual cash value. You think that would be a pretty good idea?
I don't think there's a better choice than that, period. So yeah. Now the problem with the whole life is it takes a few years to get there, right? Even if you supercharge it up front, it takes a little bit to build that cash value. So that's what's the saying? When's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago, and the second best time today. So you plant that tree today, but it's really not going to help you for a few years. And I mean, that was one of the things that helped me when I bought the properties back in 2010. So yeah, absolutely, Alex. Good point.
We have a question from Captain Novak here. Do rental properties count towards the debt you are referring to? Or are you talking about credit cards, auto loans, and any liabilities not producing income?
Really good questions, guys. So I don't know if you've read Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah. Robert Kiyosaki.
I think it's a great book. And one of the things he said in the book that has always stuck with me is your primary residence is a liability, not an asset. So technically, I would rather have debt on my rentals than my house, except for there's this one thing in reality. Money is fungible, and you can borrow on your house cheaper than you can borrow anywhere else. And so for that reason, I'm still okay with a mortgage as you're trying to accumulate assets. There comes a day when you got to say, nope, we're going to get that thing paid off, but it's your lowest cost of capital anywhere. And then to specifically answer the question, the rental properties, if they're cash flow positive, yes, they count towards the debt, but they're not the debt I'm worried about. I'm a lot more worried about the credit cards, the car loans, the student loans, the lines of credit, all of those types of things, because those are what get you in trouble, right? That's money going out the door every single month, whether you're doing well or not. And especially if you're exclusively real estate for your work, cash flow can be very inconsistent. You know, everything from realtors who sell 3 houses in 1 month and go buy a new boat and then don't sell another house for 4 months and are trying to figure out how to feed their families to rentals where big things happen. I can't tell you how many of those stupid sewer pipes I've replaced over the years, and those aren't cheap. And that wipes out your income from a property for a year, typically, at least in my experience. And so if you don't have that other debt to service, you can get really lean really quick. If you have that other debt to service, the credit cards and the auto loans and the student loans and all these things, your monthly expenses, that monthly burn number that we started with is higher. And so you have to have more income just to keep your head afloat.
Can I ask you a loaded question, Allie?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We hear so much. We're inundated with cryptocurrency, Bitcoin and everything. Should anyone consider a portion of their portfolio in something like this, or is it just gambling?
I put that at this point in the speculative category. And I tell clients the maximum amount you should have in speculative stuff is 5% of your investable assets. I find everyone wanting to buy crypto and having no savings, no 401k, no retirement money. Nothing. They don't have any of those things, but they want to go buy crypto and pot stocks. Like that's the issue there. It's getting the cart ahead of the horse. But if you've got $1 million portfolio and you're comfortable throwing 50,000 into crypto and marijuana companies and these high risk things that are also high reward, more power to you. Go for it.
5% then.
That would be the max, I would say. And you know, if you hit a home run, then you can be mad at me because you would have had more money. And if you lose it all, you're like, oh, I'm still standing. I'm going to be okay. But we're this instant gratification society right now where I want to put the money in and then the next day it's doubled. And things that double the next day also cut in half the next day.
Let me ask you one other question. We're hearing a lot of rumblings in Washington about corporate and personal taxes going up. Anything we should do in anticipation of that to protect ourselves, or what should we do if we're in that income bracket and we're hearing about the tax rates going up, corporate and personal?
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot about that too.
Yeah. Anything?
So a few thoughts. Number one, if we're saving for retirement, I think the most valuable place you can save is in a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k. Basically, you pay your taxes today, the money grows, and both what you put in and the growth comes out tax-free at retirement. Life insurance is taxed the same way. So you pay your tax on your premiums before they go in. That money goes in, it grows, and you can access it tax-free while you're alive. So I think if we're thinking long-term, not just today, that anything I have that's not taxed in the future is wise. Now, that doesn't help you with your tax bill today when you're putting in after tax. I suspect this might be the last year that we have these rates that we're in right now. And so we had a lot of clients last year, and we'll do it again this year, that will convert assets from their IRAs or 401ks into Roth IRAs. They have to pay the taxes today to do it. So as you're asking me how to mitigate taxes, I'm telling you to pay more, but I don't have a better answer because I'm a little pessimistic about where those rates are going to be long-term. And then there's some other strategies depending on incomes and things like that that we use where we can use cash balance plans or things like that to lower someone's taxable income below certain thresholds. But we're just delaying the inevitable because those taxes have to be paid later then.
What if we have a couple of investment properties where we have in the early days, you always have a lot of expenses and stuff. Your profits are minimal during that growth phase. So owning a piece of investment real estate, a rental property, for instance, is still, it would possibly be a solution, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then I'm going to go one step further on that. A lot of talk about taking away exchanges.
Ooh, really?
And so a lot. Like I've read that as much as anything else.
Wow. I didn't know that.
This might be the last year to do an exchange. Now, as I say that, I sold a property last year. Every single offer I had on it was exchange money. So if you sell something and you're going to go exchange it, you're selling at a great time and you're buying at a bad time, right? Where our conversation started today. You're buying in a very frothy environment. But again, that lever may go away next year. And I say may because I really don't know what Congress will do. But I'm not very excited about, I haven't read one tax proposal, period, that made things better. Not one. So I don't know how they're going to get worse, but I know they're not going to get better.
I have a question from Suzette. Are you familiar with the Spendthrift Trust? And if you are, what is your opinion about it for wealth creation and asset protection?
Spendthrift trusts, that gets thrown around different ways. Typically, that is set up for the next generation, typically. So it would be in my trust for my kids, and it would say they can only have money for X, Y, and Z, and the trustee would have broad discretion to stop money at any time they wanted. So you're trying to protect the assets from your kids, but also give them some access to it. Is that what you're thinking of, Suzette, or am I thinking of something different?
Well, we heard different things about the Spendthrift Trust. That's why I wanted to hear your opinion on what you know about it. If you do, I know not a lot of people know about it, so I'm just still, hearing different things here and there. But I heard that it's really a good thing to protect us now and protect the future generation as well.
Well, typically you can't protect yourself now very well. I've seen structures like a spousal limited access trust where you move assets into trusts and the spouses they're irrevocable trusts and the spouses are in charge of each other's. You better make sure that marriage is till death do you part because it's irrevocable. And that's a way to get some protection. The cost and the headache of that to me is way beyond where I would ever do it myself. Doesn't mean it's wrong, but trusts are tough. Every time you deal with a trust, there's more paperwork, there's more headache, there's more mistakes. You got to make sure you do everything right. You have additional tax returns, and depending on how they're set up, the taxes in trusts are at very compressed rates. You hit the top tax rate at like 20,000 of income. as opposed to as individuals where you hit it at, I don't know, 387 or something, 400. So it's, you know, you got to weigh the pros and the cons when you use trusts. I think they make a lot of sense in our estate planning when we're young, because if I die tomorrow, like my client who was 46 that just passed away, thank God his wife's still alive. They had trusts in their documents so that if they were both gone, the money didn't go to their kids when they were 18. So that's a place where trust makes sense all day. The stuff while you're alive, I don't know where the number is, 10, 20 million. At that point, maybe. Under that, you're probably going to spend more time, effort, money, and headache managing it and dealing with it than it's worth.
Any other questions for Ali? Raise your hand or just jump right in. This is your chance. You guys always get quiet at that moment, at that important moment. Ali, is owning your own business versus working for somebody else? I've always thought working for yourself is just, in terms of quality of life, income producing, it's always better to work for yourself or set yourself up as your own business. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I've owned my own business for a long time.
Me too.
I've only worked really for 3 companies as an adult. One was putting myself through college. I had tons of jobs as a kid, but one, putting myself through college. Then I worked for a Fortune 50 company for 5 years. And then I ran a couple of MRI clinics for a couple of years for a much smaller concern. If you're a hard worker, I think you make a lot more and have a lot more freedom and can do a lot more owning your own business. But I look at my aunt once who wanted to do become an esthetician. And at the time she worked retail. And I'm like, that's great. And I told her, I think you'll do great. It'll be awesome. I had no idea how lazy she was. If I'd known that, I would have said, no, just keep working retail, because she went and got her degree or certificate to be an esthetician, but she wasn't willing to do what she had to do to run a business. So part of it is what's in your soul, what's going to make you happy. But I think the ceiling is much, much higher with your own business for the vast majority of us. And
I work a lot harder for myself than I ever worked for any company that I was employed by.
Alex is like a plant. HSA. Good question, Alex. So HSA is one of the biggest planning tools out there that no one uses right. Those who aren't familiar with it, HSA stands for Health Savings Account. So if you have a high deductible health plan, and this is all defined by code, so your plan either qualifies or it doesn't, then you can put money into a health savings account every year. I think the family limit right now, it's over 7,000. It's like 7,600 a year. And what people typically do is they put some money in, and sometimes their company puts in, and then they get a debit card and they swipe that every time they go to the doctor or they get a prescription or whatever they do. And every time they take that money out, they screwed up, in my opinion, because you can fill that every year and you get to put it in pre-tax. So you get a tax deduction. It grows tax deferred, just like an IRA or a 401k or a Roth IRA. And the money comes out tax-free. So you can take that money and you can invest it and you can use it to pay healthcare costs in retirement, which, guess what? They don't go away when we retire. Healthcare does not go away when you're 65 and you're on Medicare. You still have premiums, you still have copays, you still have deductibles. And so great question, Alex. I should have had that in here.
That's okay. My question was, so I have one, and like, if anybody doesn't have an HSA, it's a great tool. The previous administration, really voiced for getting these HSAs. They're awesome. The only challenge I have is with investing it, I can only invest like 10 to 20% of its worth. So I'm trying to think of something that's kind of aggressive that I can invest it in, because it's such a small minimal amount. It's like, I only have $5,000 in there, so I can only invest, like 15% of that at the current moment.
So that's odd. Usually you can invest, you just have to, like mine, I have to keep 2,000 in cash in the HSA, and then the rest I roll over to TD Ameritrade, and then I invest that. So you may have to do some research there. The problem is a lot of these are driven by how the company set them up. But usually you could take most of that money and invest it.
Okay, yeah, because the custodian I use is Optum. Do you have a custodian that you recommend to be able to do that and put it into another financial institution?
I think JP Morgan I think that's who's our custodian, but I can transfer it out of there, which I do. And I transfer it out. I actually transferred it out this weekend because I got to go in and manually do it, which is a pain. And I just hold it at TD Ameritrade, and then whatever they have, you can buy.
Allie, we have time for one more question from Christian. Thoughts on ability to change employer provided Fidelity 401 to self-directed 401?
You're probably not able to, unless they allow in-service distributions and you're over 59 and a half, you probably can't. Some employers will allow you to move out certain sources. But I'm going to go, and I know everyone here loves real estate. I'm going to tell you I don't like this idea, even if you could. And I'll tell you why, because that's more important than me liking it or not liking it. One of the primary benefits of real estate is the tax benefits we get on it. And if we're doing a self-directed 401k to buy real estate, one, it tells me you don't have enough cash to be doing what you should be doing. Two, it tells me you're giving up all of the tax benefits because you don't get to take them. Three, if it's self-directed, you're not supposed to be a part of it. You need to be a passive investor. If you're not, you get audited and they disallow everything and you have a mess. And four, let's say everything I said doesn't matter and you hit a home run in there. Guess what you get to do with all that money when you take it out? You get to pay tax on it, right? As income, because it's in your 401k or your IRA or whatever. So I don't love that as a source of money for real estate personally. And I get sometimes that's all people have and they don't like the market, they don't like whatever, and they want to be in real estate. So those are my reasons for not liking it. The flip side is if you have Roth assets and you want to self-direct, everything I said is still true, except for if you hit that home run, it's all tax-free when it comes out. And so that's a better vehicle. I still don't like it, but I like it a lot better.
Allie, we're out of time here. I have one last quick question for you. I ask this every time we meet. I ask you this question. Allie, when can I retire?
Depends, Claude. How much do you want to live on every month?
I don't want everything. I just want more.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Thank you so much for letting me do this. I so appreciate it, Claude.
Thank you for coming here. Everybody give him a thumbs up or a round of applause or whatever. These are the people I love to listen to. Allie's phone number and his webpage and everything are in the chat box here. I'm going to put them in again. 720-583-2596, extension 1. Allie, if someone wants to, can they just give you a call from these numbers? And
yep, and I'll throw my cell number in here too for you guys. It's
wonderful. Thank you.
875-2159. I'm typing it in.
There we go. Hey, thank you so much for your time is valuable. And thank you so much, man. This is the stuff this is important. These are important pieces of information for everyone to consider. Absolutely. Now's the time to think about retirement, savings, everything else. Don't wait for the last minute. Do it now, even if it's a small amount of money towards a life insurance policy, a savings plan or something. When should they get started, Allie?
20 years ago.
20 years ago. There you go, guys.
Second best times today.
Everybody, thank you. Have a wonderful week. And we will Wednesday we will have there will be group training, role play training. Friday will be beer with Claude. And if anyone wants to schedule, you know what to do. Go to my webpage and go to the Entourage or private calendar. Have a great week, everybody. And let's go out here with a little. Who likes Aerosmith? I love Aerosmith. We're going to go out with a little of that. Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Claude.